Perfect. Just wanted to wait for the recording. So again, I want to welcome you all to our Anti-Asian Hate Town Hall. Today is Friday, March 7th. And thank you so much for being here. We have a great panel of distinguished keynote speakers. We have some students that are on the line that are going to be, that are a part of our Institutional Success for People of Color Task Force that will be driving the conversation today and allow for our other students that are on the line to be able to provide some input. So what I want to start with is why are we here? You know, what is the purpose of this town hall? So in order to do that, I want to go in and just say this is a forum for our students to share their stories about their experiences with anti-Asian hate on their own campuses and within their community, as well as what support or resources they need. As you may remember, in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, the SSCCC convened a institutional success for people of color task force, and we we convened some town halls. We listened to our students, and from that we had the anti-racism, the student plan of action that came from that. We're looking at doing the same thing. We've seen a lot of anti-Asian violence that has been peaking up throughout our state and throughout our nation, and how can we make sure that students within the California Community College system are feeling welcomed and feeling included. So that's what we're here for. This is not an opportunity to blame individuals or groups, but instead we want to make progress. We want to create an environment where students, and particularly our students of Asian and Pacific Islanders descent, they feel welcome and they're able to succeed. So this is a platform to provide space for healthy discussion that results in an SSCCC plan of action to inform policy decisions on behalf of our students. We want to hear from you what it is that's going to help you succeed, what it means to be an ally for our API students, so that way we can start progressing within our system. I want to go through some community agreements. These are just some agreements that, because you're on the call today, you're agreeing to abide by these unspoken rules. So one is to suspend judgment, keep an open mind, maintain the essence, dignity, and respect of what is shared. People are airing out their grievances. This is their own experience. And even though that might not be yours, we want to maintain that essence and that dignity of what is being shared. Respect and understand different perspectives. Speak truth and be kind. We want you to speak from I saw, I felt. So that way we come at it from that first perspective. Listen for understanding. Respect the strength and weaknesses of all. We all possess strengths and weaknesses, so it's great to be respectful of those. And balance listening with speaking out. So be mindful of the time. We have 2 hours this morning. We want to be mindful of that time and sharing with others. So allow for everyone to speak, and we'll have a great time today. So with that, I want to welcome, I want to introduce you to all of our guests today. First, we have our task force members. As I said, my name is Stephen Codor. I'm the president. I go to Reedley College. I'm also the president of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. And I'm going to introduce you all to our students that are a part of the Institutional Success for People of Color Task Force, starting with Jen.
Hi everyone, my name is Jen Galanado. I'm the Regional Affairs Director for Region 2. I'm also a student at Sacramento City College, and I also serve as a Senate Vice President.
Awesome, thank you so much, Jen. And Kelly?
Hi everyone, my name is Kelly Lee. I'm a student at Pasadena City College. I'm also the Region 7 Regional Affairs Director. I'm so glad to be here today. Thank you everyone for coming.
Awesome, and lastly, we have Tristan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tristan. I am from Irvine Valley College, and I'm also the Vice Chair of Region 8.
Thank you so much. And then we have our panelists with us today. Three very distinguished keynote speakers that are going to be speaking. So I want them to introduce themselves to you. First, I'm going to start with Hildegard Aguinaldo, who is a member of the Board of Governors. So Hildy, if you want to introduce yourself to the group.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Hildy Aguinaldo. I'm a member of the Board of Governors.
Thank you so much. And then we have Vice Chancellor Rebecca Ruan O'Shaughnessy from the California Community College Chancellor's Office.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here today. Rebecca Ron O'Shaughnessy, the Vice Chancellor for Educational Services and Support at the Chancellor's Office, overseeing the traditionally known as the Student Services side of the house. So our team manages the implementation of system-wide priorities like Guided Pathways Framework and the Student Equity and Achievement Program, as well as supporting most of the categorical programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Dr. Rowena Tomenang, who's the president of San Jose City College. Dr. Tomenang.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, President Kodor. And I just really appreciate the privilege to be here with all of you and work in partnership with our statewide Student Senate. It's just really exciting, the collaborations that have been taking place. So I'm Dr. Rowena Tomenang, she, her, sha pronouns. And I'm the proud president of San Jose City College, but I also wanted to share that I am the vice president of Asian Pacific Americans in Higher Education, APAHE, which is a national network of 2-year and 4-year colleges. And we have about 3,000 educators in our network that focus on AAPI student success issues. And then I'm also privileged to be on the statewide CEO board and co-chair of our new Racial Equity and Inclusive Excellence Task Force, working to implement our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative and anti-racist education work across our system. So good morning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tomenang, and the rest of our panelists and keynote speakers. We appreciate you all being here. I'm looking very much forward to the discussion that we're about to have. It's going to be awesome and very enlightening to all those that are on this call. And there are going to be times for you to speak throughout the questions. We have some, already some questions that we have prepared for our keynote speakers and for our students. If there's any questions that come up along the way, please feel free to put them in the chat and I'll get to them when we can. But let's just jump in. Let's get started. So our first question that we wanted to pose to the panelists and to our students is what does your Asian Pacific Islander identity mean to you? What does it mean to you, and why does your API identity mean what it does to you at this time? In the wake of all this violence, why does it mean so much to you at this time? So I'm going to start off with Dr. Tomenang.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for this first question, because I really think that as one of the key outcomes for the town hall is to, hear our student stories and our experiences, that certainly identity and what we experience in identity is critical to talk about. So for me, using my I statements, I embrace my Asian American and Pacific Islander identity and my Pinay identity. And these identities for me are political identities because they are rooted in my understanding of how racism, US colonialism, and imperialism have impacted Asian and Pacific Islanders since the 19th century. So I see myself and my work that I do in the community, California community colleges, as carrying out and carrying forward the efforts of those who came before me in terms of the Asian American movement, the Third World Liberation Front, and the rise of ethnic studies in the United States during the 1960s and the 1970s. For me, AAPI college students have always worked in coalition with community-based organizations to address anti-Asian racism, US imperialism, and militarization in Southeast Asia, and also tackled trying to dismantle Eurocentric curriculum rooted in white supremacy. The other identity in terms of my political identity, I identify as Pinay. And for me, my Pinay identity is further rooted in the historical lived experiences of Filipinas in the diaspora, specifically the intersection of race, class, and gender. Pinays have been constructed as hypersexualized sex workers or domestic workers or essential healthcare workers. However, I also see Pinay identity as an identity of resistance in terms of combating some of these harmful stereotypes that are so pervasive, not only in the United States, but internationally. As an example that I can give you, even when I travel outside of the United States, prior to COVID, I was always looked upon as, either a domestic worker or a nanny, for others. And that's something that many Filipinas, have shared with me, over the years. And so for me, during this time, especially the time that we're in thinking about anti-racism work and combating anti-Asian hate crimes and violence, these identities are very relevant for me because I know that the experiences that we have today are not new and that we've been struggling against violence and xenophobia and racism, for the few centuries that AAPIs have been here in the United States.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tomaning. I'm going to pass it off to Hildy next.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's beautifully said, Dr. Tomaning, and I think it's very difficult to follow up on your answer. What my identity means to me is that it contextualizes everything that's meaningful to me. I think of my experience as a first-generation immigrant and thinking about the incredible sacrifice that my parents and my grandparents made to lift everything that they own in the Philippines and come here to start a new life. And it really puts into perspective the daily complaints that I have about how hard things are for us when I realize the sacrifice that they made. I think about how we are considered to be model minorities, but only when it's politically convenient, because underlying all of that is the fact that we feel like perpetual foreigners. It makes me think about my family today, being in an interracial marriage with a son who's half white, about all of the anti-miscegenation laws and how our union would not have been allowed in the early 1900s. So I feel like my identity is today giving me such a sense of duty and responsibility to pay it forward. I think specifically of a friend of mine who is a Filipino-American judge, one of a dozen or so in the state of California, and how when he was growing up, he never imagined that he would be a judge or an attorney, that he was going to be a mechanic, because simply no one around him was able to reach that level of success. And I feel absolutely committed to making sure that as a matter of my own representation on governing boards and my own representation in the law, that folks behind me know that there are people supporting them and that there is a path for you in the law, in higher education, in frankly, whatever you want to do. So thank you very much for this question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing those experiences. I'm going to pass it off to a student now. Tristan, would you like to share?
Yeah, of course. For me, with my Asian identity and also specifically with my identification with my Vietnamese ethnicity and heritage, it's something that's inherent to me and irrevocable from myself as an individual. My identity is what has influenced the way I think and the way I perceive myself within my space, in the in-group, in my community, in my family. Being Asian and being Vietnamese is part of my culture and the way I see the world. But it's also influenced my relationship with people who aren't Vietnamese and who are part of that outgroup. It's my face and my skin color and even the food that I eat that nourishes my body, and that changes my relationship with the people around me who are my family, but also who are the ones who are trying to ally themselves with the Asian community, but who don't have these experiences. And so in this time, in the way I see it, and in this perspective of rising anti-Asian hate, it's my identity that is what informs the way I try and be an activist and try and educate others who don't have these experiences and the context to be able to immediately understand what anti-Asian hate means and how it affects me as a person. And so those types of educational experiences and perspectives is what informs and makes up my identity.
Awesome. Thank you, Tristan. Let me pass it off to one more student. Let's go with Kelly.
Hi, everybody. So I think when talking about identity and culture, I kind of think about me as a kid, right? There's this whole series called Journey to the West, and it's about a monkey and a monk and some other a friar. They want to journey to the West in order to get scriptures from Buddha, and it's a very Asian-centered tale that battles morality. It's this great show for kids, and I watched it growing up, and I was thinking, between that, picking that, and then picking also Caillou, right? It's just two separate parts of my identity that I had to battle with as a child and carrying on into now. Even now, I realize that I've suppressed many parts of myself that, are Asian, right? And, all these shows that I used to watch, I haven't continued watching Asian shows or Asian things after assimilating or trying to assimilate into a society that's rewarding kind of more American traits. And I think now, certainly with the rise of API violence, I think more than before, I realized, how much I actually love my culture and how much I, should be embracing it, because there is a deep love for it. And I think it's just with all the movement going on now, there's just not, I feel like the best time. It's always a good time, but right now, even more than ever, there's more of a need to embrace the culture and to love it and to kind of reconnect with something that has been a core part of myself that maybe I have kind of set aside for a bit and to come back to. So definitely talking about culture and identity this time more than ever is something to remind myself to reconnect with.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And Vice Chancellor O'Shaughnessy, would you like to finish us off on this question before we move on?
Sure. It's hard to finish after all these great kind of reflections and words of wisdom, but I will start with I as well. So I'm a Chinese American and a first generation immigrant. I came to this country, to New York City, when I was 16. And so I was an English learner, did about a year and a half of high school, and then went straight into college and graduate school. So my personal and professional journey of mine has taken me from the East Coast to the Midwest and eventually to California 3 years ago. So my journey and experiences in these places have really shaped my perspectives of who I am, how I interact with others, and where I fit in this country, right? I think, get probably once every month of the question from random people, where are you from? Now, I don't get that as much now because I don't see as many people, but it's a real question, right? I have been struggling with, when do I really become an American? Because I do have a place where I come from, right? And then does that make me less American? So that has been my kind of lifelong journey to continue to understand what that looks like, right? So when I think about identity, I think about there are really two aspects of it. One is really ethnic and one is racial. So when I think about my ethnic identity, I think about the country I was born in, right? The customs and traditions and the language. And I think about the country I call home, the vibrant Asian American communities, which are so diverse, right? In terms of originating culture, history, and language, and then also immigration pattern. So how do we, there's no way to really easily categorize us and generalize us, right? And at the same time, I think about at a micro level, my parents, my grandparents, and the bedrock values they instilled in me, and the values I want to pass down to my children. And then when it comes to the race piece of it, it becomes a lot heavier. I think about my own experience as a person of color, but a lighter skinned person of color, right? And then I think about immigrant who comes from an ethnic group that, for the way I look, I'm always going to be considered forever foreigners in this country, right? And then this pendulum between model minority and the yellow peril, like, right, it swings back and forth depending on when it's politically convenient. And then, you know, this our forever quest of belonging, right? So, and then this pandemic hit home for me because it originates from China, right? And then on top of that, there's this significant tension. You know, think about human rights, think about espionage, I think about trade tensions between these two countries, right? So all the misunderstanding and all the propaganda that's floating just in this general environment. And then, but at the same time, I think about the recent rise in violence against APIs during this pandemic, and they really help bring to the forefront kind of the historical oppression against this community that has been largely swept under the rug, right? But what's really unique to me about this moment is that with America's racial reckoning, largely focusing on, you know, the long history and institutional structure of racial oppression against Black and African Americans, but then the aspects of Asian American history and experience kind of converge, right, and overlapped with that. So I feel this momentum of us really be, you know, having the allyship, really push forward together, having these difficult conversations about system reform and about, you know, our common struggle for racial justice.
Yeah, awesome. That's a great way to look at it. You know, and so many people are having that same feeling, right? Feeling of being foreigners in this land that they call home still, right? I just think of all the struggles that some of these individuals are having to go through. So thinking of that, thinking of our identity and how we you know, perceive ourselves, can you share some of your experiences, maybe some of your observations on how this has made you feel about race in America? You know, with all of the current events that are going on, how has that made you feel because of the identity that you have? How has that made you feel? And Hildy, you know what? I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. I certainly had a lot of experiences very similar to the ones that Dr. Tomaning raised, where you enter a room and you're perceived to occupy a certain role in the room already. I am an attorney. Every time I walk into a room filled with white males, I'm never seen as one. And I've been left out of conversations, excluded from things simply because people perceive that I'm not able to participate in those conversations. So I've grown up with that kind of treatment for a long time now. I think more recently, though, because my son is now 2.5 years old, he's really been able to put into perspective a lot of new dynamics. My family at home, we don't really have conversations around anti-Asian hate and around the way that we're feeling around racial equity because it is uncomfortable. We try to have those conversations, but they're very difficult. But two incidents with my aunt and my mom, I think, stick out particularly in my head. With respect to my aunt, I was explaining to her some of the work that we were doing in the DEI space and how meaningful and how impactful it is. And she looked at me with this quizzical look like, why are you doing those things? And I said, what do you mean? And she said to me, well, I've accepted that I'm a second-class citizen and I will always feel like that. So I'm not going to fight it. And I thought that was so important for her to say that out loud, but also made me very much understand where she's coming from. And I'm trying very much to understand how that's affected the way that she sees herself on a daily basis, as well as how she interacts with my son. I don't want my son to feel that he's a second-class citizen, nor think that he comes from a family line where it's okay to feel like that. So I very much tried to talk with her about how that's absolutely not the case, but those conversations only go so far. And with respect to my mom, another incident that we experienced recently was that, you know, she watches my son during the day. I gave her a stroller so that she could walk around with him around the block. And I noticed recently that the stroller wasn't being used. And I asked her why. And she mentioned to me, well, it's really scary to go outside. And I don't want to be the recipient of an act of violence with Jacob being around. And I thought, that's really interesting that she feels like that, and very sad, because we live in a lovely neighborhood. She should feel at liberty to go outside, but she can't even do that. And those really struck home for me, how even though I don't see these things or necessarily experience these things on a daily basis, folks as close to me as my mom and my aunt and so many others feel that this is so real for them. And I watch this and I'm just abhorred by what I'm experiencing. And I am so eager to change that for not only this generation, but the ones to follow.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that that's, that's what we're here for. We want to ensure that, people in the community, our students, they're not feeling like second-class citizens, that they don't feel, endangered to walk out of their own house, right? How can we make sure that they're still feeling welcome, that they're still feeling, as valuable parts of this community? So, Dr. Tomaning, I'm going to pass this one off to you.
Great, thank you so much. And I just wanted to just first offer a reflection on what Governor Aguinaldo just talked about, because certainly the experiences that we have with our family members across, our generational identities, also, they also weigh on me. And so for me, because my family immigrated to the United States right before President Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines. And so when martial law happened in the Philippines, there was a lot of human rights violations that took place. And, many activists were political prisoners. My cousins used to tell me stories, later on, my cousins that had remained there, that there was military coming into the towns and the cities if there was activism and violence was occurring. So I think for me, when I grew up and as I started to get politicized, during my college years, and certainly when I got very involved, in community organizing, my parents were fearful and they too questioned me about why I engaged, in not only dialogue, but why would I go to rallies and marches and, spend all my time like in planning meetings, et cetera, because they were fearful because that's the experience that they had. And that's what they were told resulted. And it's still happening because even in the Philippines, with the government there, activists, human rights, activists are getting killed, for their political activities. So I just wanted to call that out, that that's something I think very real, with across the generations, across AAPI communities, depending on our parents' generation and our grandparents, what they experienced. And then secondly, in terms of how I feel about race and racism, I've been thinking over the years too, internally about the work that needs to happen within our own respective AAPI communities, to address racism internally, and we also can call it colorism, and I've talked about this and I've been trolled for talking about this on social media, that within the Filipino imaginary and community, because of our colonial history, colonized for several hundred years under Spain, and then US colonialism and the US education system that was brought to the Philippines, there is in the culture a valuation of whiteness, a valuation of Europeanness, that all, again, my I statements, because I can't say this is present in other AAPI communities, but it's certainly there as I grew up. And so I think in terms of racial constructs and the hierarchy of racial constructs, that was already part of my world, from a very early age, because I was darker. Two of my siblings are much lighter than myself, and and like my mother, but then my other sibling and I are darker like my dad. So I grew up, being told that being dark and being darker was not a good thing, that it was not a valuable thing for me. And And I think now in terms of the work that I do, and the work that we all need to do, we have to do that individual work, like the work within our communities, simultaneously to the work that we're doing on our campuses, to address and really dismantle those racial constructs that are so pervasive. And then one other last thing that I'd like to share too, because certainly what Governor Aguinaldo and then also Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy has shared is that I am very conscious, as I move in multiple spaces, even as a college president, I am treated differently. I'm a woman leader as well. And so I have experienced that when I am in meetings, that if I am vocal about something in a setting where I'm the only AAPI and I'm an AAPI female leader, that people don't take me seriously, or they actually react, in a defensive manner and sometimes a hostile manner towards me about why are you bringing this up? Why are you being so aggressive and vocal about it? And it's because I am not staying within that one of those stereotypes of Asian women, that we're submissive and that we're passive and we don't make waves. So I think I'll go ahead and stop there.
Yeah, those are some very enlightening experiences. I'm going to pass it off to another student. We have our RAD Region 2, Jen Galanado, who wants to chime in here.
Before I start, I'm not going to be speaking English for a quick minute. Mabuhay ka pamilya, ang ayo Jen Galanado, ako'y ay Filipino. The reason why I do that is because it roughly translates into hello family. My name is Jen Galanado and I am Filipino. Saying the phrase ako ay Filipino or I am Filipino more than ever nowadays is both a sense of pride and embarrassment to me, especially in America. If you had asked me when I was 5 years old, I would have proudly said without hesitation in my voice that I am Filipina American. If you had asked me 5 years later at 10 years old, I would have hesitated and with a little timidness in my voice said that I'm American. And then now at 20 years old, 10 years later, I now say with still some hesitancy and timid, shy pride that I am Filipina American. It's instances like this where I question my own identity and the experiences that I've had in America. There are so many times where I'm embarrassed to say that I'm Filipino because I will get judged. There are more times where I'm even more embarrassed to say that I'm American rather than Filipino, because what is going on in America today? It's a shame, it's embarrassing, and it's shocking, even with my own parents who have internalized this fear too. My parents, for my brother and I, came to this country because they wanted better for both my brother and I. I was actually conceived in the Philippines, and there was a very high possibility where I could have been born in the Philippines. But my mother, who was an immigrant and came over to the United States when she was 23 years old, didn't want that for me. I'm almost 23 too. And I think so much about the future for my own children when I come to that age, about the America we live in. It's hard to talk about because these experiences are not easy. It's hard to even find joy in the small little things that make up my identity and my culture. I can't tell you how many times I would get teased at school for coming to school smelling like onions and garlic because my mom was making adobo or panse or lumpia the night before for a big class party that I had to bring food for. I can't tell you how many times kids would say things to me that weren't even relevant to my culture and would group me in with a bunch of other Asians. Ching chong, shrimp. There was one kid who I remember clearly calling me a fake Mexican because Filipinos are in that weird, undescribable aspect of where we are identified as. The government identifies us as Asians, whereas if you ask Filipinos or even look at it geographically, we're considered Pacific Islanders. I've never felt like I belonged in this country, even though I was born and raised here. I don't even feel like I belong in my own second hometown, my adopted hometown, Manila, Ilocos Norte, Cavite, the Philippines overall. It's hard to grapple with realizing that there will never be a place that I belong, especially in a place where there should be so much opportunity for me, such as America. I can't tell you how many times I've felt embarrassed to walk into a classroom and realize, oh, I am the only student of color in here. Or even explaining to a professor or a teacher about the Spanish American War and how Filipinos were the biggest losers out of all that. I cannot tell you how many times I have been hurt by even members within my own community who are API because they didn't stand with me when I was hurting the most or support me when I needed it. Despite all these internalized microaggressions, I have to realize that these microaggressions are not micro anymore. They're macro, they're bigger than I realize. And it drives me to continue doing what we're doing. So with that being said, I couldn't tell you all, but if I could, you would just be as equally shocked as my parents were when I told them. We live in a predominantly white neighborhood. We always have, and they've always sent me to predominantly white schools. So when I went to a school where there was a higher POC population, sure, I didn't have too much of a culture shock, but there was somewhat of a shock to still see that my classrooms were still dominated by people who weren't POCs, or the fact that I was still getting told to not say this about my culture or not insert too much of my identity in the classroom or I'm going to take it over. It's so hard. So with that being said, I'll provide translations to what I said in the chat for all of you in a bit, but maraming salamat po, or thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen. And those are very, very personal, very real experiences. And it's heartbreaking that you as a student are experiencing those. And I do want to say to the students that are on here and to the participants on this call, this is a question that we're posing to our audience also. So if you'd like to speak, please just put it in the chat and I'll call on you in just a second. We're going to call on a couple of our other panelists, but be thinking about that question. What are some experiences that you have had, and how has that made you think about race in America right now? So I am going to pose that question to the audience. If you'd like to speak, please just raise your hand or put it in the chat, and I would definitely call on you. I'm going to pass it over to Tristan now, one of our other student panelists, to give his perspective.
So for me, growing up as a Vietnamese person in Orange County, I've always been connected to my community. I've always been close to Little Saigon, which is the largest diaspora of Vietnamese people outside of Vietnam itself. And it has made me realize that within this little bubble, within this community, there is an acceptance of Vietnamese people and my culture that doesn't exist anywhere else. When you go to Little Saigon, you can see people selling groceries on the sides of street corners or outside of restaurants. And it's how they make their living because it's the only thing that they knew when they came from Vietnam. Most of my family has been in America for decades, and they don't speak a word of English because they've lived their entire life in America in a space where everybody speaks Vietnamese and there are services for Vietnamese people. But that isn't the case for all members of my family. I have cousins who live in Idaho, who live in Minnesota, who have never been able to look at a sign or hear Vietnamese outside of their home. It's something where I realize that in this space, in this community that I have accessible to me is something that exists nowhere else in the United States. And it's the only place where I feel like I can truly and unapologetically be Vietnamese without anyone needing to ask me why I am the way I am. And I think in popular culture right now, there's this appreciation for some aspects of Asian culture, right? K-pop is so popular, and being Asian has been more accepted. But on the face of it, where you see the offensiveness of cultural appropriation on that hand, it's also detrimental for Asians who aren't even part of that culture when we're constantly compared to these idolizations of what Asian people are meant to be or to look like. And so living in that space, it's hard because I know that the way Asian people look, not just as K-pop stars, but as people who are of any color or any type of face, that's something that isn't accepted everywhere. And it's something that we have to navigate from street to street as our communities change. And so being in the space that I am, it's influenced my relationship with race because I know that I'm so fortunate to be in a space where I don't have to ask myself if I belong. But it also makes me realize that the moment I step foot outside of that threshold, I don't belong. And I don't belong because it's a place that wasn't meant for me, that doesn't invite me, that doesn't welcome me, that doesn't accept who I am when I want to just express the inherent aspects of myself and my culture and my identity.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan. And I mean, that's why we're here, right? We want to be able to um, emulate a feeling of belonging, right? That's what we want to get to. I'm gonna pass it off to Kelly for another student. And again, if you are on the call and you'd like to bring up some experiences, please just put them in the chat, and I will call on you next. You know, we're here to hear from students out there. Go ahead, Kelly.
And kind of going off of what Tristan was saying, growing up in a predominantly Asian community, this kind of API hatred or attack isn't regularly seen, right? Until now, you notice across America that there's communities outside of your own that are being hurt. And this idea of like race and identity has come to the forefront of everyone's minds and thoughts. And I think going back into what Dr. Algonado and also Dr. Tomaneng mentioned before about being respected, in conversations, in leadership positions. I think this especially speaks to my own experience being in student government and trying to pursue a career in politics or in the legal field. I realized that as I enter further deeper into the field, there are less and less Asians. And when I realized that, I realized my own Asian is more. So my own Asianness is amplified when there are like less Asians around me, obviously. And I think that part really brings out aspects of self-consciousness, right? Feeling as though my identity and culture might be barring me from certain opportunities because I am different, right? I'm never accepted as one of the male 6 foot tall, attorneys or lawyers that I potentially would want to emulate, right? That's the thing. That's the problem is that, people are trying to, especially someone like me, right? Trying to assimilate into into identity that would be most beneficial in order to kind of move forward a movement that you're trying to propel, but then trying to also accept that that's a double-edged sword, right? And then battling that and also kind of having to prepare more, being stronger, being better in order to be on the same level as somebody who's already accepted as someone who's stronger, as someone who's better. Is something I have to accept and grapple with as I continue in this career and continue in this field. I want to also mention this whole, idea of model minority, right? A lot of Asians grow up thinking about, or being raised being told by their parents to, stay small, stay unseen, stay unhindered. You don't want to make trouble. I think if you guys watch Fresh Off the Boat, there's this scene where one of the main characters describe the model minority, right? How that has affected her and how that has made her feel like she should be shrunken and small and not seen and not heard in order to not cause trouble, in order to not cause waves, because that is something that would make her less accepted, right? And less accepted means less opportunities. And that's exactly the problem, right? That a lot of Asians face, especially I think Asian women, especially me being 5 foot tall, when I enter a room, there's no automatic respect, right? Everything I say, everything I do, it has to be earned, and it has to be accepted by a group that is already in power. So that itself is a huge mountain that I think a lot of Asians and a lot of, especially Asian American women, are trying to hurdle past when they are advancing their careers, when they're trying to advance their dreams in a country that wasn't made for them. So I definitely, echo everything that everyone has said, in terms of sharing those experiences, because I truly believe that, this is something that's potentially hurting a lot of students, right? Students who want to pursue these careers, students who are dedicating their time and their life to these positions of potential power and of power and of responsibility, in which they wish to be seen and heard just as powerful as their male counterparts or their male white counterparts. And yeah, so I definitely want to speak to that experience for the students on this call that may be experiencing the same thing.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And yeah, I think that is a huge mountain that a lot of Asian American women have to battle, right, and have to climb. I do see there was one audience member that would like to speak, Vic Chung. So I'm going to turn on your mic so that you can speak, Vic. And anyone else, if you'd like to chime in, I think you're good.
Thanks, President Couture. I want to share that. So I am my family is both ethnically Vietnamese and Chinese, and I think, connecting to not only this question but the previous questions that have been brought up, I connect to a sense of policing even within like my own family space, right? That I'm not Chinese enough or I'm not Vietnamese enough. So I do think that as we talk about like the rise in anti-Asian sentiments, I think for me, it's a reckoning that I've experienced in my personal life, where like the reckoning with the Black Lives Matters movement and coming to really wake up from the fact that even my family has experienced violence and where my uncle was murdered by the police. That, as I think about the overall arching concept of policing, it's not only something that exists systemically, right? It is something that we have brought into our homes, and we have perpetuated, within our walls. And it makes me think of, as I'm in student government, as I'm advocating for things that I believe are protecting the opportunities that were given to me in the community college system, that I feel angry, not only that it's not just people outside of the group turning us into a monolith. I think sometimes it's often even within our own communities where, when we aren't able to agree and have the same political views, we attack one another. And I think it's part of that, right, divide and conquer agenda that, kind of brings us back to, right, as we exist in the larger hegemony and this white supremacist culture, it makes me feel as though, right, when we address this, and we address this in a societal level, and we talk about the need to, to recognize the amount of hate that and violence that has resulted in the death of and the fear of so many of our Asian siblings, right? I think it's also really important to also recognize the type of hate that we carry and we hold within ourselves, right, towards one another and towards our other siblings of color. And I think I feel like, you know, as we talk about this town hall, it's important to also recognize the importance of essentially building toward a multiracial coalition. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vic, and thank you for being so authentic and providing that personal experience. And I had the pleasure of working with you throughout the year. You're a great student leader. I take this time to hopefully empower you and tell you to continue what you're doing and you know, continue to you know, bring about success within yourself and within your community. Are there anyone else on the call that would like to speak up at this time, share some experiences or anything along those lines? There is going to be some time for questions at the end also. All right. Vice Chancellor O'Shaughnessy, would you like to chime in before we move on to the next question?
Well, it's very hard. I'm still kind of processing emotionally from the last comment, but I think similar to that, kind of looking back at my journey, I have kind of learned and lived and worked and thrived in a predominantly white environment until I came to California. So the default narrative that I started from is, you know, not created by me or the APIs, right? So, you know, as I was growing personally and professionally and witness experience perpetual microaggression, you know, I was programmed, right, to blame the individual bad actors every time, right? And then because that's the only way to kind of reinforce the notion of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, because that's what the productive immigrant should be doing, right, in this country. So I really, you know, I kind of reflecting on those moments, the inflection points where I start to feel more empowered and take over the narrative to define who I am and what it means to be an AAPI in this country. I really got a lot of the support through allyship. Really kind of start to think about, you know, the yes, we have our unique struggles, but, you know, more importantly, there's this common struggle for racial equity for all of us. And APIs have all the same kind of issues and concerns that other Americans, marginalized Americans do, right? Our issues are not any less insignificant or less important, right? We care about equitable access to healthcare, jobs, you know, economy, right? And then the prosperity, right? So I really think, you know, I have benefited greatly from the support from other marginalized communities and the leaders from those groups that give me encouragement and show me the rope of how to define ourselves, right? And how to really take over our own identity. And that has been a huge growth and moments for me in my journey of becoming who I am, becoming the leader in the space where I want to be, I want to model for others, and I want to really collaborate with other leaders to really bring that kind of system level change. So it's really kind of the inflection point of like, how do you learn from the personal experiences and then really find allyship? And then now we can build that like the multiracial coalition to really tackle the fundamental problems in this country.
Yeah, thank you. That's what we're here for, right? We want to be able to tackle those problems and become allies together. So thank you so much for that. So now that we're on this topic of racism and race in America, and we've already talked about your identity as individuals. Now, when we put those together, how has this played out in the classroom and on our campuses? You know, what is your experience with your identity in the educational space? I mean, what does that look like? So Dr. Tomenang, I'm going to pass this off to you first, and then we'll go off of that.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. So I think that, you know, probably for others in the town hall too, we're just we're sort of pausing and taking it all in. So I do want to say that the last set of sharing has just been very powerful for me, and it's been emotionally triggering for me as well, because it kicks up so many other instances over the years, over the decades since, even when I immigrated and came to the United States, just in terms of like bullying behavior, like the slurs, all of that, it's just sitting with me right now. And so I just need to call out those feelings of anger, and frustration that after so many years of doing educational work and feeling like I have been a champion of anti-racism work and doing that very deeply, that there is so much work that still needs to happen. We hear these stories from our students across different, racial and ethnic groups. And sometimes it feels like it's still invisible, right? How many stories do we have to tell over the years on our campuses and in society for people to really understand and do something different, change their own behaviors so that we can, be more caring towards each other and really behave towards each other as we are, human beings. So I feel just very like angry and impassioned right now, about that, because I know for many of our student leaders on this call and our colleagues that we have been working for, this, to have this sense of belonging on our campuses, repeatedly across just the last hour. I've been hearing, feeling un-American, lack of belonging, feeling different, like feeling not respected, not being taken seriously. This is why our students are not succeeding in our institutions. So we have to fundamentally even looking at our facilities, okay? How many of our institutions have multicultural centers? How many of our institutions have services that, provide a space for the diversity of our Asian American Pacific Islander students to even have a sense of belonging? Not many of our campuses even have affinity group clubs, right? To provide that sense of community. So I think for me, just from the campus perspective, as the president of a very diverse college, this is what I've been thinking so hard about as an institutional response. What is the institutional response going to be? Not only with the racial disparities that the pandemic has made visible, but also how for Asian American Pacific Islander students, with the rise in hate crimes and xenophobia, that they feel silent, they don't feel cared for, on my campus. Likewise, employees, from classified professionals, from faculty, from administrators, have, shared their how they've been impacted by this, feeling like they really, want to be in allyship, and they are in allyship. They are interested in coalitions, and doing the work together across our different racial and ethnic groups. But at the same time, there's been so much hurt that they can't speak out or they can't share, because if they share, then they're going to be perceived as not really caring about Black lives, or as not really caring about, Latinx lives and what have you. And for me, I think what I've been trying to do, with my students, with my faculty, with the classified professionals and managers, is trying to provide as much space as possible for people to share what they are feeling, even if they can't take action right now. Sometimes we are emotionally so devastated and we're grieving that it's okay for us to pause, and we need to pause and we need to regroup. And we need to be with others, who are willing to hold that space with us, because only until we're able to do that can we then really move to action, and we just get our energy back up, and then we could keep striving to meet some of these challenges. And I know for me, that is what, I go to that, like I go to being in the spaces where I'm hearing from students, where I'm hearing from the rest of my employees, because that gets me out of that moment of frustration, of hopelessness, and I get energized again because I know that this is what I'm working towards. This is why I came into higher ed, because, as a student of color myself who experienced that lack of belonging, from uh, kindergarten days, that I don't want that for any of my students. I don't want that for my children. I don't want that for anybody. So that's what I can offer up right now. And I'm sorry I took a lot of time, but I just have so much emotion right now, and I just really appreciate this space, that our Senate statewide leaders have provided.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Tomaning, and thank you for calling out those emotions, right? That the people on this call are feeling, that sense of hopelessness, frustration, anger. And it makes us call, like, what resources do we have available to our students, to our faculty, to our administration on our campuses to provide space? Because like you said, our institutions and our allies should be able to provide us space to heal, to go through these emotions that we're feeling. Like you said, it might not take action right away. It might take reflection for a while. It might take, just time to grieve. So yeah, I really appreciate those comments. Jen, I'm going to go to you next.
For sure. So to piggyback of what everything was said is that we need these resources for students. For the first time ever at my community college, we have an API support center. I wish it was there earlier. I really do, but it was, I believe, 2 or 3 years in the making. We couldn't have it right away because the main argument was, oh, finances, or we don't have the budget for it, or we just can't we don't have the funding for it. And part of my French when I say it, but to some degree, that's some BS. That really is. I could not tell you how angry and frustrated and mad I was when looking through the budgets and seeing there's some funding for this. You just don't want to give it to us. You just refuse to give it to us. I look at our board of trustees for Los Rios. I look at the students in each college's campus individually. And Sacramento City has a high Latin population, whereas Cosumnes River has a high AAPI or API population. And students have been asking for it for some time. They really have. But the fact that it's only on one campus right now, when this could benefit so many others, would be so helpful. And I can't emphasize on that enough. It even goes hand in hand, more of a reason why there's such a big push for ethnic studies. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from students, or even experiencing myself, that students felt unwelcomed in the classroom or un-American enough. I remember one instance particularly where a student stopped me in the middle of me talking or giving this speech in an English class and said, I don't understand you because of your accent. And for me, I was shocked because for the longest time, I thought I had done a really good job of repressing my Tagalog or Filipino-ness because I needed to appear more American in order to be accepted and be respected by my peers and get the littlest ounce of belief from anyone to go ahead and lead or do anything that I wish to do, especially from the perspective as a student leader. So how this goes hand in hand with ethnic studies is that this conversation is a conversation that will never end. I can't tell you enough how important having ethnic studies is because students wish to see themselves represented in the classroom, like our DEI work. We need diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom so students feel welcomed in the classroom so they don't feel like they're being excluded from conversation. It needs to be there because students, especially students of color, such as API students, are represented and seen in the textbooks. I remember, again, another instance where I called out a professor and the textbook that was written, and I believe the professor had written this textbook, and I'm like, how are you only going to give me 2 sentences of my Filipino history and then tell me what my Filipino history is? Because my history is my history. I understand you wanting to put my pain in there, but there's no one else who can talk about my pain. You can sympathize with my pain, but you cannot emulate it in a textbook that is not even from a perspective that you understand. And mind you, this was a instructor who was unfortunately white. I was also told at one point that taking a language class like a Tagalog or Ilocano class was considered a fulfillment of ethnic studies. And believe me, I almost blew a gasket there and said, no, that's not what this happens. That's not how this works because language is different from ethnic studies and students need to be represented in the classroom through their own history and having someone to explain that and accurately and effectively teach that. Even if you're not per se Filipino or any other API ethnicity, it's so important to have that in the classroom because these are perspectives that bring so much to what's going on in the classroom. It's more than just the winner's history or the white winning history. We need, excuse me, no more weak statements, that's on me, but I can't tell you how often I've seen my people's history colonized and going through white colonizing mentality. I can't tell you how frustrating that is, especially when it's coming from a professor who doesn't exactly understand the entirety of the material of what happened in the Spanish American War as the Filipinos lost, or why there are 1,775,000 islands in the Philippines and how each one is different, how Mindanao is different from Ilocos Norte. Apologies for the background noise. I think someone's getting my trash, but I encourage each and every one of you to continue that conversation on ethnic studies. And not only that, have hard discussions in the classroom. I remember when the passing of Angelo Quinto, who was a Filipino American in Antioch, came about, and that was a conversation in the classroom. A student actually tried to shut me down, and I said, no, not happening, because we need to talk about this. We need to talk about how he was going through a mental health crisis. We need to talk about how the police treated him. We need to talk about what happened in his history and how it goes hand in hand with everything else that we need to see more of within the classrooms. We need to have these hard discussions, and that also includes students getting their input in there. And that's so incredibly important to uphold the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion that we are doing right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. And I think that's why there's been such a focus on DEI, over this past year, really trying to ensure that we see DEI within our classrooms to encourage, students to participate, to encourage and empower students to be there. Right, I put it in the chat, but are there any other students that are on the call that would like to chime in here and give some classroom experience on what they've had to go through? And any of our other panelists that would like to All right, let me go to Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly. Oh, you know what? Let me go to Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy first. Sorry.
Sure. So I'm just kind of thinking about, right, campus climate and what's happening in the classroom fundamentally impact students' learning outcomes, but also if we don't do it well, it's also a tremendous missed opportunity, right, to empower our students to be able to share their experience, to heal, to collaborate with one another, and to lead the conversation, which is their conversation, it's their journey, right? It's their learning journey, and how do we, from a system level, support that? And I think about my work, which is over the student services area. How do we remove the otherness, right? And bring that sense of belonging? Why do the most needed students need to jump through the most hoops to get the support they need, to get the stability and wellness they need, so then they can fundamentally prioritize their education? And how do we rebuild? And then how do we, when we put the students in the middle, how do we rebuild our structure fundamentally, right? And then to really remove those barriers to say, right, can we come from a place of you belong? Therefore, we own your success. Therefore, we need to provide all that's necessary so you can just learn and share and lead, right? And then additionally, I think about the classroom. And how do we think about the student services area? We have a lot of expertise in the area that have been doing deep work with students individually. How do we bring these knowledge and expertise into the classroom? So in the classroom, ethnic studies is one great example, but how do we build that classroom climate, right? Improve that, so then the faculty and others and we can build a support team around that to support students and create the universal design, right? So the students can feel supported in their educational journey. So those are the things that I'm wrestling with, of how do we really build in that overall welcomeness, right, across all different functions within our system, and really examine our structure. Rather than, we definitely need to support the categorical programs, right? To have them really bring resources to them to support students. But what about the structure, right? Because currently these categorical programs are working despite the system. But there's a huge opportunity for us to re-examine the system, so then we can bring that equitable access and that belonging to the classroom and to the campuses.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice Chancellor O'Shaughnessy. I think that's the thing, right? We want to be able to reevaluate the system, to be able to make it better and more successful for these students. All right, Kelly, I think we've gotten it fixed out. If you'd like to chime in here.
Yes, I kind of just want to reiterate what everyone's been saying, especially in higher education, this kind of stereotype or kind of preconceived notion that, that certain Asians, especially maybe like Chinese Americans, are more privileged. This idea is harmful to other like ethnic components of the AAPI community, because obviously different identities have different resources and different backgrounds, right? And it cannot all be included into under the idea that Asians are already privileged, right? That they have this stepping stone, because many of them don't. And myself as a Chinese American, I'm a low income student, and a lot of people, of course, higher education, they don't see it as that, right? Especially this goes back into international students, right? My college, not to call them out or anything, but they were requiring students to put in their deposit as soon as 1 week, giving about I think it was like a 5-day notice to these students, and under the pretense that they were able to pay for these things, right? Not understanding that a lot of them are low income, and this whole generalization and this stereotype has harmed so many communities. And I kind of just want to put that in there when we're having conversation about higher education and what does that mean for different marginalized groups, and to kind of reconsider maybe even my own, right, some preconceived notions about certain groups within the AAPI community.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for sharing that. So I was actually reading an article just yesterday, and it came from USA Today, and it was saying that there was more than 164% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes since the first quarter of 2021, and that's in just 16 major cities, jurisdictions compared with last year. It's saying more than 6,600 hate incidents have been reported in the year after the pandemic began in the United States, and that's according to the Stop AAPI Hate. And that's more than a third of those instances were reported just in this March alone. So with all of these recent acts of violence, right, with all of this anti-Asian racism, how has that affected your relationship with your API identity? And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to go first to Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy. So how has this affected your relationship with your identity with all of this, violence that's going on?
I think I feel very saddened about the deaths and the violent instances that has surfaced in social media and our popular news channels, but also about how many that have not been kind of witnessed and has not been shared, and how many of the recipients of them, many of them are older, many of them are immigrants, many of them have internalized all these incidences, and many of them are kind of okay and accept the fact that they can be second-class citizen in this country. And it triggers a lot of emotions and experiences from my past, right? But at the same time, I feel like this is a great kind of moment for us to kind of build that solidarity, to reach out to the members of our own community, to uplift them, and at the same time to reach out to other communities that they are also hurt, right? And they are also organized to really drive at fundamental changes, right, to our racial structure in this country. So I also feel very encouraged by the conversations and by the difficult conversations, right? And I kind of have to go back to Asians are in an interesting place. I think we are, right? How do we talk about our pain and suffering and our quest for racial equity, right? And at the same time, really, and to get really clear that, that is not a counter narrative to Black Lives Matter, right? How do we build that allyship to say, yes, our sufferings matters too, and we need to collaborate and work on this together because we have the common mission, right? We are really in this inflection point of our racist past and our democratic ideals. How do we go from where we are to where we need to be as a country? And I think for me to think about my cultural identity and to be more proud of my cultural identity, to be more outwardly supporting, right, to be outwardly more vulnerable and share my experience and share my stories and advocate for my community is largely grounded in the faith I have in this country and what it can be, right? And that is, for our family, we made a conscious decision, right, to come to this country. So for us, it's because we believe in the ideals in this country and the optimism we have, right? So and we are having difficult conversations, and sometimes these conversations can turn very dark because there are a lot of the experiences and pain that we're sharing. But I'm very, very encouraged in terms of where this conversation is going and how we're building that allyship across all the minoritized groups.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Vice Chancellor. I'm going to go over to Tristan next.
Hi. With the rise in anti-Asian racism, it's really made me feel defensive over my Asian identity. It's something that's inherent to me that's being attacked unjustly, that is singling me out and making it known to others that it is something that they can harm me and harm my loved ones because of who we are. But I think that more than ever, anti-Asian racism has made it clear to me that I am Asian and that my Asian identity is something that is significant. because I think that within the Asian community, there's this prevailing idea that the closer we ingratiate ourselves with Western culture, that we become more associated with whiteness and white Western identity, the more insulated we are from these things. And that's a big part of the model minority myth as well. But the reality is that no matter how much we associate ourselves with Western culture, how much we portray ourselves as being more educated or more elitist or whatnot, we're still different. We're still a community that has historically been discriminated against and will continue to face racist attacks. And so I think that's something that I've been all the more mindful of, and that I look at when my family members espouse Western rhetoric and Western culture as holding this place of supremacy over our own identities and the heritage that we come from. Because it's not something that one is better or should replace the other. It's something that is inherent to us. We can't erase our Asian identity. And all the more with these recent acts, we need to defend our Asian identity and make sure that our communities can still accept us and who we are.
Thank you, Tristan. That's some great insight. I'm going to go next to BOG member Aguinaldo.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Tristan, for sharing. The recent acts of violence have really taken me through a roller coaster of emotions. And at the very beginning of that roller coaster was anger for me. The anger, obviously, that folks in our community should not be treated like that. But then the anger turned quickly to what I could do to make the world a better place. And I specifically sat in thinking what my role as a lawyer and what the role of the legal system is in perpetuating equality and really breaking the systemic racism. I recently learned of a case called involving, I think it's Mammy Tape v. Hurley. It's an 1885 California Supreme Court case where a Chinese American student couldn't attend a specific school in San Francisco specifically because of her race. And it's a narrative that's very common to us. But I was just so surprised that it was in 1885, so long ago. And what is interesting from that case for me was that one of the boldest advocates was her mom, and that we all have a different place in making a change, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a mother, whether you're a student, there's a role for each of us. And as I'm sitting here evaluating my own role, I looked to the side of me and in front of me and behind me thinking, why aren't more people coming to the front lines? Why aren't more people fighting the way I feel like I need to fight? And it goes back to what Dr. Tomaning was saying. We're all in different places. Sometimes it hurts too much to be in the front, and that needs to be okay too. That we need to meet each other where we're at so that when we're ready to take up a certain spot, that somebody will be there holding our hand and ushering us through this journey that we personally, professionally have to go through. So today, as with the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm sitting in a space of continued learning. I'm evaluating not only my space, but my breadth of knowledge, understanding our history and how history is many times repeating itself, and how I can help others in their journey to continue learning. So I urge us to stay curious and to stay collegial so that we can develop on this and hold one another up. A quote that's been sitting in my head for a long time now is, lift as we climb, root as we rise. We really have to hold each other's hands while we make our way through this journey. And I'm so excited that we're creating this space on this town hall to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for actually bringing that up, because I want to add in our next question because I see a lot of similarities here. And Dr. Tomanek, I'm going to go to you next. So, with these recent acts of violence and everything, and the way that we have, how it's actually affected your relationship with your API identity, how can we best be allies in this space? Like during this time, how can we support each other, and what does that look like? So Dr. Tomanek, I'm going to go to you next.
Mhm. So thank you. And I think that Governor Aguinaldo said it very well too, in terms of meeting people where they're at. In many of the conversations that I've had in the past year, but also over the years, as I continue to do anti-racist work, in education, has to do with really embracing a cultural humility approach in terms of this work. And so long time ago, I thought that if you are not in the front lines, if you you are not there being vocal, then how are you really down with making the change? And I think that as we begin to do deeper work and engage with each other, we do come to understand that we are all at different places, in our learning. And then also in terms of our comfortability, not everyone is going to be at the center, as Hildy just talked about. There are so many roles that all of us can play in making the changes that only we can make happen. It's not going to be other people that make these changes. It's going to be us. And so, I really want to underscore the importance of collaboration, building partnerships, building, I would say, critical relationships with, on your campuses, with other student organizations, with the administration, with the faculty senate, with the classified senate, externally to our campuses, build relationships with community-based organizations that are committed to this work, build relationships with our civic leaders, because something that I really love seeing right now is that our legislators within the broader AAPI community, they have taken action, not only statewide, but they have taken action nationally, demanding that, policies and protocols be put in place to ensure the safety of our elders, of our children, of ourselves. And they're working in partnership with all of us. So just to give you an example, in Santa Clara County, we do have a Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute that kind of works across community-based organizations, educational organizations, and our civic leaders and our legislators. And so they have formed sort of sustained action and sustained education work across the different counties in the San Francisco Bay Area, so that every week there is something happening and whoever can make it come. And what just excites me and keeps my energy going is that so many of our students are involved. K through 12 students, they're going, with their parents, to some of these rallies and educational events, in addition to community colleges and four-year universities. So I'm kind of, one of my disciplinary areas too is around social movements and how social movements really inspire all of us to get involved, and, one thing that across social movements is that there are all of these different opportunities to engage. Even if you're just at home writing letters to support what was talked about earlier, Jen talked about, we need to advocate for AB 1040, ethnic studies. You know, it's at the Assembly Appropriations right now. We've got till the 10th, September. We've got till May 10th to submit more letters of support so that we could keep advancing, decolonizing our curriculum. You know, Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy talked about it has to be more than ethnic studies. I completely agree. We need to have a radical multicultural infusion across all disciplinary areas. The burden can't just be on ethnic studies. So, you know, so for all of you who are very much interested in coalition work, ally building, building critical relationships across, you know, different organizations and different sectors of our society, please follow up with me. I'd love to connect with you, you know, in terms of, you know, giving you different opportunities to be involved and get engaged, because it has to be sustained. We already know that, you know, as soon as something else happens, right? Like there's another media focus on other issues, or even the most recent gun violence that we have, that media can really turn and make, you know, lessen sort of the energy in a movement and make it invisible again. So what we need is sustained activities and sustained educational events like this one. And then also to open it up to invite, you know, our other ethnic groups to participate, because we can do this if we really commit to working with each other, you know, and supporting each other's different efforts.
Amen. Thank you for that. I'm going to pass it off to the students real quick. So I'm going to go to Jen first and then to Kelly.
All right, thanks for that. And it goes hand in hand with what was already said by everyone here. We as people, we stand on the work of our elders, our ancestors. In the Philippine culture, it's such a big deal to honor your ancestors and your elders. So for me, I stand on the work of my manongs, my ninongs, my ninangs, my ates, my kuyas, my lolos, my titos, my lolas and titos. There's so many more I could say, but it's also what I do now is in preparation for my adings and my anaks, my youngers. Everything we do now is all for them. We need to work together and empower each other. That work, and that's done with in continuing the work that our ancestors have already built for us. They laid the foundation for us. We need to continue that. And there's something beautiful about it. My mom used to say to me all the time, "Hanap ang pangdanghan," which means find the beauty in things. And I truly am seeing it here with all of you showing up here, being present with us by sharing your stories with us and being vulnerable with us and allowing us to be vulnerable with you as we share these experiences. And like Dr. Tomaning said, we need to push for legislation. The work can't just be left on ethnic studies. There's so much more to do. We can create and change the culture at our college campuses by working together and finding allyship in each other. We work together, how do I phrase this, Tess? We accomplish so much together than against each other, because already enough with these internalized microaggressions as BIPOC people, we're already pitted against each other already. And in order to overcome those microaggressions, we need to work together as a whole and as a united front to resolve those immediately. And it starts with them young. Get kids to start young. Like someone was saying, getting kids from K through 12 to start participating in those rallies, even having those super difficult, hard discussions. I can't emphasize that enough. These discussions will never not be hard. They're only hard if you allow them to be hard. So let's make those hard conversations easier by talking about it and tackling it on head on. It's not easy. I understand, I get it. There's a 40-year generational gap between my parents and I, but we've got to have these hard discussions and somewhere find the middle ground or the middle way, because we can't solve it by working against each other. And that includes doing so much more work than just having those hard discussions. That includes pushing for legislation. That includes advocating for ethnic studies. That includes so much more. And I could just go on and on about it, but I don't want to take up too much time because I think all of you understand the point. We need to work together and find allyship in each other to solve this together as one united front.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. All right, Kelly, finish us off, and then I'm going to ask our last question.
Awesome. I just want to, thank all our speakers and everyone for being here today. First and foremost, this is amazing that we're giving this opportunity and this space. I find that it's pretty rare actually to find this kind of space, especially for the API community. And I think especially during this month, it's more prevalent now than ever. And I kind of just want to reiterate the fact that, that this is an individual, but also team responsibility. First of all, changing your own mindset, right? Like for me personally, right? Changing my mindset of the model minority, right? Being brave and telling myself that, my opinions matter, right? What I'm saying is important. And although that might be true, getting myself to believe that is the hardest part. And I think that's something I'm personally working on. And I understand probably a lot of AAPI students, and especially maybe women, especially those of small statures. So I definitely want to put my, heart and I guess, what is it called? Warm wishes, I guess, or, all my hope in terms of giving you also the same energy and accepting and taking pride in your identity and being proud of yourself for understanding the value and the role that you have in progressing the change that we want to see. And obviously every decade is different, right? 20, 30, 40 years ago, America was totally a different environment than what we have today. So we are making a step every hour, every second towards that future that we want to see. And every single one of you guys on this call is holding a torch, right? Either as an AAPI member or as a Caucasian member or whatnot, right? You are holding that torch to become and to see the change that you want to see. So I definitely encourage those conversations that Jen and as all our wonderful speakers have mentioned before. Having those conversations in the classroom, having it with your families, having it with yourself, most importantly, I think is the first step in towards progressing for the change that we want to see. And I definitely also want to mention a legislation, the S937 of COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. So there's other acts that are being moved, progressing forward right now. It's already passed the Senate, which is amazing improvement that it's passed the Senate, the hardest, probably two of the two decision-making bodies that we will see, and is now going to the House in terms of aiming to track down and respond to hate crimes involved with this whole COVID-19 scenario. So that's definitely a positive that I also want to end off with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for bringing that to light. So I want to end today with this question before I pose any questions from the audience. But I mean, we have representatives from each of the different segments. We have Board of Governors here, we have the Chancellor's Office, we have CEOs, we have students. So what's next? We've had this time to come and heal, but what sort of action do you think that we need, and coming from your segments, what action can be provided by your segments? What sort of resources are out there or that can be requested by students, by grieving individuals to be able to start to heal and to be able to start to be more successful within our California community college system. So I think I'm going to work from the top down. So I'm going to go Board of Governors first and pose this to our BOG member, Aguinaldo. Like, what do you see out there, and what's on the horizon? What can we look forward to? What's available to us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen, for the question. First, I'd like to acknowledge the wonderful leadership we have in the system already. Our current board president, Pamela Haynes, is such a warrior for equity, as our chancellor is, Chancellor Eloy Oakley, and our deputy chancellor, Daisy Gonzalez, and so many other folks throughout the system. It's with those three individuals that I have the most exposure to personally that I appreciate the foot forward they're putting into making sure that we're setting the tone for equity. So I really want to give them a shout out. I think we look at the reality of our governance structure on the Board of Governors level. We have a ton of public members who don't have higher ed experience per se, I'm the only Asian on the board of governors. And we have 2 student members who are doing a hero's lift and really advocating for the students. You have Colin Fitzgerald and Yulia Tarasova, who without them, we would not have the insight into the day-to-day student life that we do with them. And they are doing such a wonderful job representing for you on the board of governors. We need more of them. We need to literally duplicate them, clone them, make more like them. And I think on this call, there are so many students, so many folks just sharing that same level of passion, because the thing that they do best is give us insight into what is truly affecting students. Because at the end of the day, the Board of Governors, I think specifically my role on the Board of Governors is to advocate, to make sure that we are listening and taking the real life experiences of everyone involved in the system and making it responsive to our students. Our informal motto is we serve the top 100% of students. And we need to do that by advocating. So I want to hear from you. Please talk to us. Please share your stories with us, because it's in that way we are able to be responsive to your needs. So please reach out to us. I would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Bog Member Aguinaldo. That's great. And I mean, that's when we see the most support, right? It's when we mobilize and we get, students to come and give public comment and really, drive the narrative that students need more help, empowering those students. So, that's why we have a bill that's going to be seeing the floor to get that second year student member to be a voting member of the Board of Governors. Because we need to empower those students to be able to make those decisions and provide that insight and give that student perspective. So next I'm going to go to Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy to give the Chancellor's Office perspective.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And I really appreciate the Student Senate to create the space for us to have this conversation, and all the student leaders on this panel for your candor. At the Chancellor's Office, like board member mentioned, we're so blessed by the board and the Chancellor's Office, by the Chancellor, to set the tone for equity and give us, all of us in the Chancellor's Office, the cape that we've always want to put on to combine our professional duty and personal passion to do equity work. So when we think about equity work, especially relating to kind of our identity as AAPI, right? But our identities are so much more nuanced than that, right? We are multiracial, we're undocumented students, we're LGBTQ, we're students with disabilities, we're all of that. So how do we participate in these conversations to say, okay, what are those shared barriers that the system has not been set up, right, for us, so then we can achieve educational success, right? So how do we, through evidence-based, how do we, through data, right, looking at qualitative and quantitative student experiences to redesign our system fundamentally from that perspective. And then so we can really do equity work, not from the fact that it's just a moral imperative, right? Because it really is a growth imperative. We cannot really advance our vision for success goals and move the needle if we don't focus on equity and look at our focus on specific equity priorities, right? So how do we, and then at the system level, how do we dedicate advocacy efforts, funding, and other resources to really put our money where our mouth is, right? To say, if we care about equity, these are the things we're gonna do, and then these are the specific action items. With the theory of change, we're going to get there. And then we're going to constantly evaluate our work collectively, not from a compliance perspective, right? But from a planning perspective. We're going to try different things. We're going to try cool things. We're going to try crazy things to see if it works, right? If it doesn't work, that's a learning moment. Let's try something new, right? Just because a clinical trial says this drug fails to cure cancer doesn't mean we stop doing the work. So how do we continue to dive in the work, develop a close relationship with data that's fundamentally built on student experience, and have specific actions to really drive and evaluate those outcomes and continue to improve? So from our perspective, we want your leadership, right? We want your leadership in participatory governance structure, so then we can continue to have conversations with you and get input from you and get guidance from you, right, in terms of what we need to do to improve our system. And we want you to share your experiences with your college leaders and with your student senate leaders so we can continue to have these dialogues. So I really appreciate, again, this opportunity and look forward to continue to working with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy. I'm going to kick it next to Dr. Tomanang from the CEO perspective.
Thank you so much. And I think I just want to build on what Governor Aguinaldo and Vice Chancellor Ruan O'Shaughnessy have said. And it's that it's about that this is the time. I feel so strongly that this is our moment because we have system alignment around the work that we want to do to meet our student equity outcomes, to address intersectional equity issues across all of the students that we serve, and really to begin the work of decolonizing our educational system. So this, for me, it's been very exciting in terms of the alignment that we have and the support of the Board of Governors, with the call to action on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are doing as a system, the Chancellor's Office, we have moved from equity talking to equity walking. And that is what excites me about all of the partnerships that we want to continue. And so when Hildy and Rebecca, if I may, say we really want your participation and your leadership, it's critical. We are not here for ourselves. We're here for all of you. And so your partnership is essential. And we want you to let us know what can we do, to have strong partnerships with you. We don't want to come from a collaboration perspective where we know more than you do, because if what it means to really value what you bring to our institutions, it means that we are valuing all of your strengths, that you bring, your knowledge, your skills, your lived experiences, your culture, all of that we're embracing that so that we can really build with each other. And I'm excited in terms of the work of the CEOs. For the CEO board, we identified last year, and it's going to be an ongoing priority, that doing this work for DEI, centering our work, for the system for CEOs, focusing on student equity, racial equity is a priority. And we are getting together, for our own internal professional growth to share effective practices and equity-based practices as CEOs through the work of our Racial Equity and Inclusive Excellence Task Force. Because, we need to also talk about why can't students participate more when we invite them to all of our governance meetings, to all of our special task force meetings? Well, what we can do is we could offer more of a stipend structure, right? We give stipends to our faculty to participate in these special, work groups. Maybe we give overtime to our classified professionals to participate and engage, but if we really want students at the table, we need to think about, maybe we need to give you work so you're not so that you're not working outside of the campus that takes you away from participating in governance. So that's just an example of what we can do. We are in deep conversations about campus racial climate and the relationship between even our physical environments on campus and the programs that we commit to. If some of you participated in last week's Black Student Success Week, and the whole focus on following the money and where we're putting our resources, well, we can say the same thing. And some of you have said that, follow the money for how AAPI students are being supported across our system, right? Follow the money in terms of how our students with accessibility needs are being supported across our system. What about our LGBTQ communities? So, you know, what I'm really excited about is that we have just started, you know, and what I was telling Stephen earlier when we were getting ready for this town hall is that students, you are so powerful, okay? It has been students who have made significant changes in our educational institutions since the founding like of this country, okay, that deems AAPIs and others un-American. We mobilize, you have power. And so let us know how we can continue to partner with you so that you can feel, you know, your power and you can exercise your power because you can really make a difference. And I go back to the beginning, Asian American movement, Asian American studies, ethnic studies, Third World Liberation Front. Look at what's been happening in the last 10 years around our institutions across 2-year and 4-year, dealing and holding institutions accountable for campus racial climate. It's the students. The students are organizing. Just like statewide Senate has worked across the system around even budget reduction. If you remember, you know, why do we go to Sacramento in March? Because the students organized, you know, to keep support for community colleges. So, so feel free to contact me after this town hall because I really look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Tomanang, and I really appreciate your leadership. So this we're right on time, but I do want to give the students that are on the panel and the students that are in the room and in this call still, like, what do you need as far as resources, as far as support to be able to to be able to succeed within our system? You know, we've heard from the different segments on what they're doing and how they can you know, how they need the support of students, but what is it that we need as students to be able to succeed? Any of our panelists want to start, or to you know, anyone in the audience? We'll finish it off here.
I think for me, one of the things that I found the most support from are the Asian resource centers that are present at IVC. IVC, OCC, Coastline, and maybe a few other colleges in my region, they're all designated as Asian serving institutions. And the Asian resource centers that exist there are my lifeline to other Asian communities and the resources that Asian people need in order to be successful with higher education. But just recently, just this year, in fact, the Asian Resource Center at IVC was defunded and it isn't able to continue to operate in the capacity, even in a similar capacity that it has in time previous. And so for the thousands of Asian students at IVC, including a lot of whom are international students, we aren't able to get the support and resources and counseling that we need in order to be successful at college. And so I think that more funding and also more Asian resource centers in general are what's necessary in order to bring the community and especially the Asian community who wants to pursue higher education together and to provide them with access to the things that they need in order to be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan. I think that's a huge resource that our students need, and a lot of them are lacking because, you know, their college doesn't provide that resource for them. So I'm going to pass it off one time to Kelly, and if there's anyone on the call that wants to chime in real quick before I close this out, definitely now's the time. Oh, I think we lost her. All right. Well, oh, there she goes.
All right. Okay, I'm back. Yes, I just wanted to also say that I think, especially during the month of the recent COVID-19 related attacks, having these schools put out a letter of support made me feel recognized and made me feel I guess, seen in a place where I've never really been seen before. I feel like a lot of times higher education and maybe just, community colleges across California, there's this kind of notion of bundling groups together. And I think for a while, I think the Asian community, AAPI community has been kind of bundled together to be unseen, unheard. And recently, in light of recent attacks, seeing our colleges stand up for us has been really warming. And that's just, I think, the start of a larger movement. So that definitely is when I feel the most supported, especially during this recent past.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. And I think that's where, as a student senate, where we're landing, right? We've heard, this was a great time of healing for our students. This is a great space to be able to provide for students to air out their grievances and just to be able to support one another. And I think what we see is, sending out that support through, at the beginning of the year as our anti-racism student plan of action for our students. These are the things that we need to do as an institution, as an organization, as a, the biggest promoter or the biggest institution of higher education. These are the things that we need to do to be able to include our students, to be able to help them succeed. So now I think it's, what are the areas that we need support in? We need these centers to be able to allow for students to go, and feel included. We need, we need diversity training to be able to, I had a student that reached out to me in the chat that said, they had an ESL student that went to a counselor and the counselor couldn't understand enough of their English. And they said, come back when you know a little bit more so that way I can help you a little bit better. We need to be able to address those issues, to be able to make sure that students don't leave our institution because they don't feel welcomed, that they don't feel included. I think this was a great time to be able to provide that space for our students. I want to thank each and every panel member that provided their own personal experiences, that provided just authenticity on this issue. That we have seen some outrageous acts of violence towards our AAPI community. And we as an organization want to make sure that everyone on this call knows, and all of our students know, that we are here for support. We're here to help, foster an environment of inclusion, and to be able to, promote student success and be able to, provide for our students in their times of need. So the SSCCC stands with each and every one of our students. We are here for each and every one of you. Please continue to reach out to us. I want to thank everyone on this call. You did an amazing job of providing your own personal experiences and really encouraging the students and the faculty and the staff and everyone else that's on this call to continue their work. So I just want to say thank you. Please, as we leave, follow us on social media at SSCCC_official. That's our Twitter handle, our Facebook, our Instagram. We'd love to have you follow us. But yeah, with that, I just want to say thank you. We'll close out here and, appreciate all of your time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for coming.